In the mid-1990s, the world believed it had found the formula for infinite economic alchemy. They called it the Asian economic miracle. From Bangkok to Seoul, the statistics were defying gravity. Countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea were posting 8 to 9% GDP growth year after year. Skyscrapers shot up where rice paddies used to be. The World Bank published a famous report, literally titled The East Asian Miracle, suggesting these nations had cracked the code of prosperity. But this miracle wasn't magic. It was a machine. And like any machine run at red-line speeds, it had a critical, hidden design flaw. The machine ran on two specific settings that, when combined, created a dangerous feedback loop. First, the peg. The Thai baht, the Indonesian rupiah, and the Korean won were effectively locked or pegged to the US dollar. For a foreign investor, this was the holy grail: certainty. It meant that if you put $1 million into Thailand, you didn't have to worry about the local currency crashing and wiping out your profits. Second, the magnet, the carry trade. To keep their economies stable and attract capital, these Asian central banks set high interest rates, often 10% to 15%. Meanwhile, in the US and Japan, interest rates were low. This created a phenomenon known as the carry trade. For a hedge fund in London or a bank in Tokyo, it was a no-brainer. Borrow money in Japan at 1%, lend it to a Thai developer at 12%, and pocket the difference. Because of the peg, the risk of currency fluctuation was perceived to be zero. It was viewed as free money. Billions of dollars of hot money flooded into Southeast Asia. But this money wasn't just building necessary infrastructure like roads or schools. It was fueling a speculative mania. It built luxury golf courses, empty condo towers, and financed corporate empires that had no business expanding. It was building a skyline of debt on a foundation of sand. Thailand was the miracle's poster child, but by 1996 the machine was overheating. The problem was a currency mismatch. Thai corporations were borrowing in US dollars because the interest was lower, but earning their revenue in Thai baht. This worked fine as long as 25 baht equaled $1. But if the baht ever lost value, their debt would mathematically explode. By late 1996, Thailand's exports slowed. The country was spending more dollars buying imports than it was earning from exports. To maintain the artificial peg of 25 to 1, the Bank of Thailand had to intervene. Every day they sold their precious stockpile of US dollars to buy baht, artificially propping up the price. The sharks began to circle. Hedge funds, including those managed by George Soros, smelled blood. They realized the Bank of Thailand was running out of ammo. They began to short the baht, betting billions that it would crash. Inside the Bank of Thailand, Governor Rangchai Maracanyond faced a nightmare. The pragmatic economic option was to devalue the baht early, to let the pressure out of the valve. But that was politically unacceptable. It would be an admission that the miracle was over. So, he chose to fight. In a secret, desperate operation in May 1997, the central bank launched a counterattack. They bought billions of baht to squeeze the short sellers. For a moment, it worked. The hedge funds lost money, but the victory was a mirage. To win that battle, Thailand had secretly committed almost all of its foreign reserves on the forward market. By June, the truth hit the governor's desk. The official report said they had $30 billion in the vault. The reality was, they had already promised almost all of it to future contracts. The vault was effectively empty. The flaw was exposed. You cannot defend an artificial price forever against the collective belief of the entire global market. On the morning of July 2, 1997, the Bank of Thailand raised the white flag. They announced they would float the baht. They expected a gentle decline. Instead, the floor fell out of the world. The baht didn't just fall, it collapsed, losing half its value in months. Companies that owed dollars suddenly saw their debts double overnight. Bankruptcies swept the nation. But this wasn't just a Thai crisis. It was a logic bomb, and it had just detonated across the entire continent. Global investors woke up and asked a devastating question. Who else looks like Thailand? They looked at the map and saw the same flaws. Pegs, hot money, and corporate debt everywhere. Panic went viral. This was the Contagion. Capital didn't just walk out of Asia, it sprinted. Indonesia fell next. The rupiah crashed from 2,400 to the dollar to over 16,000. The economic collapse triggered massive riots, leading to the fall of the dictator Suharto,
Former President Suharto
including violent crackdowns,
ending his 30-year reign in chaos and flames. Then, the unthinkable happened. South Korea, the world's 11th largest economy and a symbol of industrial might, began to buckle. Its massive conglomerates, the chaebols, like Daewoo and Kia, were leveraged to the hilt. When the foreign credit lines were cut, the country was days away from defaulting on its national debt. They had to beg the IMF for a $58 billion bailout, the largest in history at the time. This wasn't just about stock tickers. In Jakarta, the price of instant noodles, the staple food for the poor, tripled. Starvation became a real threat. In South Korea, the shame was so deep that a national gold collection campaign was launched. Millions of citizens, from housewives to CEOs, lined up to donate their wedding rings, trophies, and heirlooms to the government to be melted down to pay off the national debt. The miracle had turned into a social and political earthquake. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, arrived as the firefighter, but many Asians felt they brought gasoline instead of water. The IMF offered loans, but with brutal conditionality. Slash government spending, raise interest rates to 20% or 30%, and let weak banks fail. While this was standard economic theory, in practice, it strangled the remaining healthy companies. The cure deepened the recession. The crisis eventually passed, but it left a scar that rewrote the global rulebook. The West, specifically the U.S. Federal Reserve, watched the carnage and concluded that liquidity was key. When their own crisis hit in 2008, they did the exact opposite of what the IMF forced on Asia.
Essentially down by 4-5%. The market is now down 21%.
We're now down 43%.
They flooded the system with money, rather than tightening it. The East learned a darker lesson: self-reliance. Countries like China and the recovering tigers vowed never to be at the mercy of the IMF or Western speculators again. They decided to build a fortress. They stopped running trade deficits and started running massive surpluses. They began hoarding US dollars, building stockpiles of foreign exchange reserves that today number in the trillions. This shift created the modern global economy. Asia's hunger for reserves is what funded America's debt boom in the 2000s. The 1997 crash wasn't the end of the Asian miracle. It was a brutal software update. It exposed a fatal bug in the code of globalized finance, that stability built on borrowed money and borrowed time is an illusion. The world fixed that bug. But in doing so, they installed a whole new operating system, one where the East became the banker for the West, ensuring that the next time a crash came, the power dynamic would be very, very different.